Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a couple of musical guests standing by in the wings. I'd like to welcome back a couple of people who've been on separately. This will be the first time they've been on our show together. Welcome Twig and Lee.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You guys have played together before.
Oh, just jamming, yeah.
Yeah, just jamming.
All right, well, you ready to jam tonight?
Yeah, we are.
All right, we're ready for that. But first, we have our Hemp News segment. We have a lot of videos tonight, some with John Trudell and Vivian McPeak and Dr. Todd Micaria. And of course, as always, Jorge Cervantes. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
Welcome to our Hemp News segment. As part of our President Trump's recently released fiscal year 2021 budget plan, Trump proposed ending an existing policy that protects state medical marijuana programs from Justice Department interference, in addition to a provision that would continue to prohibit the District of Columbia from regulating the sale of marijuana for adult use. This is the opposite of what Trump said during the 2016 campaign. With WWJ News Radio 950 in Michigan on March 8, 2016, Trump said, quote, "I think it certainly has to be a state. I've not smoked it. It's got to be a state decision. I do like it, from a medical standpoint. It does do pretty good things. But from the other standpoint, I think it should be up to the states," end quote, President Trump said. Although the rider has been continually renewed in appropriations legislation since 2014, there have been hurdles along the way. President Obama asked for the policy to be removed, and Trump doubled down by omitting all language involving medical cannabis protections. During last year's appropriation session, an even more expansive amendment was approved by the House. It would have provided protections for all state and territory marijuana programs rather than just medical cannabis systems. Unfortunately, the Senate did not follow suit, and the provision was excluded in the final fiscal year 2020 legislation sent to the president's desk. Attached to Trump's large-scale spending legislation in December was a statement that said he is empowered to ignore the congressionally approved medical cannabis rider, stating that the administration, quote, "will treat this provision consistent with the President's constitutional responsibility to faithfully execute the laws of the United States," end quote. Trump has been notoriously inconsistent with his view of the importance of state rights. By proposing an end to state medical marijuana protections and blocking the District of Columbia from legalizing, he is potentially putting thousands of Americans at risk. Our next story is out of Vermont. Senate-backed legislation to regulate Vermont's retail sale of marijuana to adults continues to advance in Vermont's legislature. Members of the Vermont House Ways and Means Committee recently voted 7-3 in favor of the bill, which is Senate 54. The proposal now awaits consideration from the Vermont House Appropriations Committee. If approved, it will go before a full House for a vote. Senate lawmakers have already approved a version of the bill by a veto-proof supermajority. As approved by Vermont's House lawmakers, the measure would establish tax rates and other regulatory measures on the retail sale of commercially marketed marijuana products. Changes made by House lawmakers will need to be approved by the Vermont Senate. In 2018, Vermont's lawmakers approved legislation legalizing the personal possession and private cultivation of marijuana by those ages 21 and older. However, that law did not establish a structure for the retail production and sale of marijuana. To date, only one state, Illinois, has taken legislative action to authorize adult use cannabis sales, which went into effect the first of this year. It remains uncertain where Republican Governor Phil Scott of Vermont stands on this bill, Senate Bill 54. In the past, he's expressed skepticism toward the notion of legalizing marijuana sales, but some insiders indicate that he's softened his stance in recent months. Our next story is out of Israel. The use of medical cannabis is associated with a reduction in the use of ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, medications in patients diagnosed with the syndrome, according to data published in the Israeli medical journal Rambam Medicus Israeli. Investigators surveyed 59 patients with ADHD who possessed a license from Israel's Ministry of Health to access medical cannabis products. They reported that the use of medical cannabis, and in particular products dominant in the cannabinoid CBN, or cannabinol, was associated with medication-sparing effects. The findings suggest that some ADHD patients may consume cannabis as a substitute treatment for more conventional medications, the authors concluded. They added, quote, "These results, though not causal, might shed light on the potential beneficial effects of medical cannabis on ADHD symptoms, severity, and motivate future prospective studies in order to validate our results, and perhaps even consider making ADHD an approved indication for a medical cannabis license in Israel in the future," end quote. Clinical trial data published in 2017 in the journal European Neuropsychopharmacology previously reported that the administration of whole plant cannabis extracts is associated with improvements in cognition and behavior in subjects with ADHD. The full text of this study, cannabinoid and terpene doses, my screen locked, are associated with adult ADHD status of medical cannabis patients, appears in the Rambam Medicus Medical Journal out of Israel. Next story is from Chicago, Illinois. Patients enrolled in a state-sponsored medical cannabis access program report improvements in their health-related quality of life, according to data published in the journal Behavioral Medicine. A team of investigators from DePaul University in Chicago and Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore surveyed 367 patients enrolled in Illinois' medical cannabis registry. The respondents reported that cannabis was most efficacious in relieving symptoms related to pain, anxiety, depression, and insomnia. Overall, patients suffering from multiple symptoms were most likely to self-report gaining relief from marijuana. The authors concluded, quote, "In terms of therapeutic value, our findings suggest that the wider the range of symptoms that a patient reports, the more likely that it is that they will perceive benefit from medical cannabis. Our results suggest that comorbid pain, anxiety, and depression may be particularly amenable to treatment with medical cannabis." The full text of this study, Perceived Efficacy of Medical Cannabis in the Treatment of Co-Occurring Health-Related Quality of Life Symptoms, appears in this month's edition of Behavioral Medicine. Next story is out of the United Kingdom. The abrupt cessation of CBD, or cannabidiol, is not associated with physical withdrawal symptoms in healthy volunteers, according to data published in the journal Epilepsy and Behavior. A team of investigators from the United Kingdom and the United States assessed the occurrence of withdrawal symptoms induced by the abrupt cessation of CBD. Subjects in the trial were healthy volunteers who ingested 750 milligrams of plant-derived CBD twice daily for a period of 4 weeks. The study's participants either continued to receive CBD or received a placebo during the week 5 and 6. Researchers reported no serious adverse events resulting from the discontinuation of CBD. They concluded, quote, "In healthy volunteers, no evidence of withdrawal syndrome was found with abrupt discontinuation of short-term treatment with CBD," end quote. In 2018, federal regulators classified Epidiolex, an FDA-approved formulation of plant-derived CBD, as a Schedule 5 substance, the lowest restriction classification available under federal law. This study, Abrupt Withdrawal of Cannabidiol, or CBD, a randomized trial, appears in Epilepsy and Behavior. Next story is out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The enactment of state-specific medical cannabis access laws is associated with a decline in workers' compensation claims, according to data published in the journal Health Economics. A team of researchers affiliated with Temple University in Pennsylvania and the University of Cincinnati in Ohio assessed the relationship between medical marijuana legalization laws and workers' compensation claims over a 23-year period. The authors report that legal cannabis access was associated with a nearly 7% decline in worker compensation claims. Post-marijuana legalization, workers' compensation claims decline both the propensity to claim and the level of income from workers' comp, end quote, the authors determined. They continue, quote, these findings suggest that medical marijuana can allow workers to better manage symptoms associated with workplace injuries and illnesses and in turn reduce need for workers' compensation, end quote. The authors concluded, quote, our findings add to the small but growing literature on the effects of medical marijuana laws on labor market outcomes. On net, the available findings suggest that medical marijuana law passage may increase work capacity among older adults, reduce work absences, improve workplace safety, and reduce workers' compensation claiming and pain and suffering associated with workplace injuries, end quote. This study, Medical Marijuana and Workers' Compensation Claiming, appears in Health Economics. It's our last story for tonight. Out of Connecticut, we have 3 state legislative updates. Out of Connecticut, Connecticut's Governor Lamont outlined funds within his 2021 budget proposal to prepare for the legalization and regulation of adult-use marijuana in Connecticut. The proposal includes automatic expungement of past convictions and other social justice-focused provisions. Separate legislation is pending in Connecticut's legislature to implement the governor's budget recommendations with regard to marijuana legalization. It would allow adults to possess up to 1.5 ounces of marijuana for personal use. The measure also includes provisions allowing individuals to get past records expunged, facilitating social equity in the industry and protecting consumers from employment discrimination. Out of Kentucky, legislation is pending in Kentucky House Bill 136 to permit physicians to authorize access to medical cannabis for any patient whom they believe would benefit from its therapeutic use. And our last note is out of Hawaii. Hawaii Senate Bill 2543 would prohibit an employer from discriminating against a person in hiring, termination, or condition of employment based on the person's status as a medical cannabis card holder or positive drug test for THC. So that's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. And now Twig and Lee have been standing patiently by, ready to play some music for us. Welcome back, folks. All right. Thank you very much, ladies. So that's a Santana song. Is that Soul Assassin?
Oye, como va?
Ah, okay.
She got to sing it instead of me.
I see. With the flute. Well, we'll see you back here at the end of the show. Thanks a lot, folks. Thank you, viewers out there. It is Friday, the 14th of this month, right? Yeah, the 14th. It's Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day. And we are live tonight. If you have a question or comment for us tonight, you can call us at that number that'll appear on your screen shortly. There it is, 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. If you're watching anywhere in the country or you know someone who should be, right now we are live and streaming on Facebook at facebook.com/restorehemp. That's facebook.com/restorehemp. You can also watch hundreds of shows, past shows if you want, or scan through our archive at youtube.com/cannabiscommonsense. That's youtube.com/cannabiscommonsense. So again, if you have a call or question for us tonight, call us at 503-288-4442. It's 503-288-4442. We have several videos for you tonight, and as we often do, we're going to start with our friend Jorge Cervantes. Has about a 5-minute video we're going to run here, and we'll be back, take questions and comments right after this video. So stay tuned.
Hi, this is Jorge Cervantes, and I've got these these earmuffs on here, so well, sound bothers my ears. So anyway, I can't hear. I might be talking too loud. I'm not really sure. But why do I have these on? Well, because I just sprayed my crop here. You see, all this stuff's really wet. All this foliage is really wet. Well, I sprayed it with activated aerated compost tea. Let's take a quick look over here. I sprayed it with that. Here's the container. I did a video here just recently about putting this activated aerated compost tea on. But you can see that's awfully wet. And notice today it's really cloudy. It's cloudy today. So that's why I picked this time to put this spray on. The reason I put it on when it's cloudy is so, well, it won't hurt the leaves. So, because otherwise they get they burn. They burn. Anyway, so what I got here is my leaf blower, blower. And I'm going to pick up the sound a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this blower right here to dry these leaves off a little bit so there's no water setting on them when the sun comes out. Because, see, when the sun comes out, that's the problem, is it's got that moisture sitting on there. Well, what happens is when the moisture's on there, the sun could shine through and burn the leaves. So I want most of it off beforehand. So I'm just going to turn this on, and I still got the camera handheld. Anyway, then we'll see what happens. There we go. Here's the thing. We're blowing now. We'll just blow this stuff off. I'm not hitting it too hard. I don't want to hurt the plant. But see, it's just like making a windstorm for them, and it cleans them up. And they should be able to take this little bit of abuse like this. The plants are pretty strong. And if they can't take a little abuse, well, I started to blow it off because the sun's going to be coming out. So anyway, let me turn this darn thing off. So now, okay, let's see. Oh wow, dude, that's been much better. Anyway, yeah, that's one of my little tricks here. And you can see all of this kind of stuff in the Cannabis Encyclopedia. You know, I make all these videos for free and give everything away for free. It takes me a few minutes to shoot these videos. Then I've got to edit it. And then after I edit it, I've got to upload it. That whole process for a 5-minute video, 5-6-minute video, takes about an hour to an hour and a half. So when you see 200 videos out there, that represents a minimum of 200 to 300 hours. That's a heck of a lot of time, you know. And anyway, so what I'd like you to do is go look at the Cannabis Encyclopedia and pick up a copy. But you will also save a ton of money because there's a lot of people sell you stuff you don't need. And a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. So anyway, this is Jorge Cervantes. I'll see you in the next video.
All right. That is our friend Jorge Cervantes, who is actually from Oregon. Lives in Spain most of the time these days, but he first did all his research right here in River City back in the 80s for his first book, Indoor Marijuana Horticulture. Anyway, we have more videos for you here in just a moment. Our next one will be with the person who actually discovered THC back in 1964, and then 30 years later, in 1991, his lab and he discovered cannabis's analog in the body, a chemical in the body, endogenous cannabinoid that he named, and his team at Hebrew University in Israel named anandamide, which is the Sanskrit word for bliss. And so Raphael McCoolum is still out there and lecturing and giving speeches on an international basis at various cannabis events around the world. So I think that video is ready. We'll be right back. I think it's ready.
Its name is THC, and it was discovered back in 1964 in a lab in Jerusalem by chemist Raphael McCoolum.
Cannabis had not been well investigated, which was strange. After all, it was being used illegally or illegally by millions of people, and yet we didn't know that much about it. So I thought it's a good idea to look at it again from a modern point of view.
In the lab, McCoolum and his colleagues broke cannabis down and zeroed in on the chemical components that might be causing its effects.
We isolated about 10 compounds. Surprisingly, out of the 10 compounds we isolated, only one, which now is known as delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, in short THC, only one causes the well-known high. We tested it in humans, many of my friends, and we saw that the compound is effective as we expected it to be.
The identification of THC answered one question, but raised another. Just what did it do to the brain?
I had always assumed that people knew how marijuana worked. It surprised me, actually, when I began looking in the research literature that it was really clear that no one really knew how it worked.
In 1988, Lynn Howlett found the answer. She discovered that deep inside the brain, THC molecules activate a previously unknown network of specialized chemical receptors.
So that was proof that there is a receptor protein in the brain that can bind to the THC like a key in a lock.
It was very exciting because what that meant to us was we had a tool that could be used for studying, and other researchers could use it as well. And people could study where the receptor was in the brain.
Howlett and other scientists found the receptors in the hippocampus, which forms memories, the cerebellum, which controls movement, and the frontal cortex, where we think.
Here were these receptors that this chemical produced by a plant out in the world just so happened to have the precise combination to unlock. What an extraordinary thing that is. Is that why that receptor network existed, so that people could get high?
We don't have those receptors just so that people can get high smoking pot. Receptors are developed in neurons so that they can communicate with a chemical that the body makes.
So that was the logic behind going in and trying to extract a compound in the brain that would act just like marijuana did.
And in 1992, proof came that the brain does make a compound very much like THC. It was discovered by none other than Raphael Mechoulam, who named it anandamide.
We call it the brain's own marijuana because the compound that is made by the brain, anandamide, shares all the properties in terms of at the receptor level and cellular level that THC has.
It turns out that when anandamide is released in the brain, like marijuana, it affects such basic things as appetite, pain, and memory. And it plays a critical role in a sometimes underappreciated mental function, forgetting.
When I first heard that, it didn't seem adaptive to me to have a drug for forgetting. Memory, we understand, has great survival utility. You learn that that's a poisonous mushroom or that's a dangerous animal, and you stay away and you remember that. But why would forgetting be adaptive? And I asked Mechoulam this question, and he said, well, tell me, do you really want to remember all the faces you saw on the subway this morning? Forgetting well is almost as important as remembering well. Forgetting is about editing. It's about taking the flood, the ocean of sense information coming at you and forgetting everything but what's important. So life is not just about accumulating new memories. Memory can cripple us too. You have soldiers returning from war zones that are traumatized by experiences that, in effect, they can't unlearn. So if you could help them unlearn that, essentially a productive kind of forgetting, either with a drug or some other kind of regime, that would be incredibly useful.
So that is a little documentary from PBS about Raphael Mechoulam and the discovery of anandamide and THC. One thing that they didn't cover there is that anandamide is at the body's endogenous THC is also in mother's colostrum, the substance that a female breast excretes when a baby is born before full lactation starts. And this THC in the brain, in the colostrum, probably makes the baby hungry. But when we talk about the danger of children and cannabis, very few people realize that a parent's, a mother's first milk to their baby contains endogenous THC. So it's a pretty interesting topic there. So we have another video now. This is from the Seattle Hemp Fest, and one of my favorite events each year. It's coming up in the third week of October. I think this year will be the 25th. So stay tuned for another 5-minute video about the Seattle Hemp Fest. We'll be right back after this.
Really strong, yeah, and they're compact and dense and super sticky. See that? Really sticky, just a little touch, and that's sticky. Okay, let's see here. This is still got a sharp. Yeah, but I'm still amazed, like I say, about the rain and how,
they have two videos.
How well they got through the rain.
Oh, I think there was some other audio there that was interfering in that. It does appear. Let's see if we can get that video rolling again. Again, this is an all-volunteer show. It is Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2020. If you have any questions for us, you can call us at 503-288-4255. 4442. That's 503-288-4442. Is that video ready to roll again?
You're ready.
All right, we'll be right back.
I'm standing here at Hemp Fest in Seattle with Keith Straub, the founder of Normal. And thank you for that. And what do you think of this event?
It's my favorite event of the year. I travel around and do a number of these kinds of things, but there's nothing on the scale of the Seattle Hemp Fest other than the Seattle Hemp Fest. So for those who haven't seen it, it is incredibly empowering. And I think 12, 13 years now I've been coming in. I find it fascinating. And I think people in other parts of the country are beginning to pick up on that same phenomena. And the Boston Freedom Fest is coming up in the month, and that's a wonderful thing on the Boston Common with all the history associated with that. And in the Portland Hemp Sock, and that's about the middle of next month as well. I was there last year.
So 12th and 13th of September.
12th and 13th of September. If you're in the region at all and you identify with marijuana smokers or as marijuana smoking, for Christ's sake, come to this thing. You will find lots of people that are like-minded individuals like you. And as I say, you'll feel empowered by it.
This is peace, love, and understanding that we're doing here. Peace, love, and understanding.
Save your seeds. It doesn't take a miracle to cultivate the weeds.
You can't sell brownies, you can't sell pot, you can't sell Rice Krispies at Hemp Fest. Why? Because we know how to keep this thing going, and that will bring us down. We have an unprecedented amount of freedom here. No other city in the world, no other rally in America especially. I don't think any in the world is doing quite what we're doing. So please understand, we do not want to be the narcs, man.
We arrested our 20 millionth American on marijuana charges. Are you ready for 420? In the midsummer, the state of California determined that it would be missing $1.4 billion in taxes if we didn't legalize it in California. Probably 10 times that many nationally. We've helped almost 100,000 people in 8 states, get a medical marijuana permit. So that means they can legally possess, use, and grow medical marijuana. Medical marijuana is a great step forward, but it's not the end. What we need to do is end adult marijuana prohibition, restore industrial hemp, and help medical marijuana patients.
The man who started it all, Jack Miller.
Hemp will be the future of all mankind, or there won't be a future.
Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, we're going to legalize marijuana no matter what happens in 10 years, because when 60% of the American public wants something, they're going to get it. Contact your legislators. Tell them, end marijuana prohibition. It's time to tax and regulate it. The more letters they get like that, the sooner the day will arrive. We're going to legalize marijuana!
wasteful. Look at this. It doesn't even mean. What if this was a drink fest, alcohol fest, meth fest, heroin fest, cocaine fest? There'd be dead people here. There'd be fights. There'd be stabbings. But it's pot fest. It's hemp fest. We are proud. We are loud. Give me thanks. E-M-P. What do we want?
I freaking love Hempfest. Hempfest is the shit. Hempfest is badass. Go Hempfest!
September 12th and 13th, Portland, Kelly Point Park. Yay, please come. Everybody's welcome.
All right, so that is from the 2009 Seattle Hemp Fest. That was the last one that Jack Herer spoke at. That little scene of Jack Herer was about 2 weeks before he gave his very last speech at our Portland Hempstock Festival on September 11th. And he had a massive heart attack right after he left the stage and never recovered, unfortunately. But he made a huge difference. And, you know, back in 2009, it's easy for us to forget today that many people still thought that marijuana legalization was impossible, but it wasn't impossible. And so we made it happen, and we can continue to make that happen. So I had a little sad piece of news here. Just in last Wednesday, our friend Paul English, the drummer for Willie Nelson, passed away from complications related to pneumonia. I was blessed to be able to visit Paul English in his home there. This is from December 20th of 2016, a few years ago. But Paul English was the original outlaw of outlaw music. He was a drummer and enforcer and best friend for Willie Nelson. This is myself with Paul English and Mickey Raphael, which is Willie Nelson's harmonica player. This is back in Florida in 2011. But from 2011 until 2016, I had the great honor to be the medical cannabis grower and caregiver for Paul English and Willie Nelson and many other people on their bus and in their entourage. So I just have to say my condolences, blessings, and prayers for Paul English and his family and friends, and just make a note of that this evening. We have another video that we're preparing to run, and we'll be right back after this next video.
The use of cannabis goes into antiquity, as probably everybody knows, but what is not known or what is not appreciated is the fact that it was clinically available for roughly 100 years in America and Western Europe for a variety of therapeutic uses. It was called cannabis. And the term marijuana was described as a mongrel word that was applied to the Mexican use of cannabis, that very few agencies within the federal government at the time, back in 1937, understood that it was the same as cannabis. So they thought marijuana was really a separate plant, separate material, and didn't connect it with the medicinal uses. Well, in 1937 they had hearings before the Ways and Means Committee about marijuana, which then produced the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. And they imposed an additional regulatory scheme and tax on physicians for using cannabis. And this was more or less the death knell of the medicinal uses of cannabis that were lost until just recently. Many years ago, I was smitten by an attack of idle curiosity during my sophomore year in medical school, during the pharmacology course. I happened to unintentionally read a chapter on cannabis in Goodman and Gilman, which described the medicinal uses and described also a fairly draconian punishment for its use. And this was consistent with what social attitudes existed back then in 1959. Well, this illicitude, needless to say, whetted my curiosity. I realized that I should really keep this to myself, that this was not something that I would submit to any department for a research project, because it would have surely been the end of my medical career. So, I read up what was available in the library, and then that summer went down to Mexico and across the border, where it is technically illegal but available. So I used some slang words for it, and the street dealer that accosted me upon my arrival immediately understood. He then got me 10 joints that I paid for, and I said, okay, come with me, and I took him up to my hotel room, and then at random picked one of the hand-rolled marijuana cigarettes out and said, okay, light it up and take a few puffs. And he showed no hesitation, and so I at least realized it was not poisonous. So then I embarked upon my personal bioassay experience. I put this down after a while, having nobody to communicate with and no source, until 1964, at which time, during my psychiatric practice training up in Oregon, I became aware of it. I finished my psychiatric residency at Mendocino State Hospital in California, and then sought to find out more about it by forming a Socratic relationship with somebody who was in the biz of psychedelic drugs. And so went to serve a brief preceptorship with Dr. Humphrey Osmond back at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute. This is 1967. I then was headhunted by the National Institute of Mental Health Center for Narcotics and Drug Abuse Studies, and with the specific assignment of research into marijuana. Needless to say, this seemed to be right up my area of interest, and left New Jersey for the psychosis inside the Beltway. And the first stop was at the National Library of Medicine, where I ran across many more medical papers, medicinal papers and pharmaceutical papers that motivated me to assemble what I felt to be the creme de la creme and put it into a book the Marijuana Medical Papers, 1839 to 1972. And I'm about to embark on an update with a new introduction based upon my personal clinical research that I've been able to achieve since then. It's quite a few years between 1972 and today, 2004. I was at the National Institute of Mental Health in 1967, and another of my assignments was to spy on the communes in California, because at the height of the fear of the Vietnam War, the year of the Tet Offensive, and the total embroilment in conflict, both in the United States as well as in Vietnam, they were fearing the fall of civilization as manifested by certain rebellious behaviors, principally on the West Coast. This all then intertwines with a policy on drugs, because at this time LSD was not completely illegal and it was getting wide play. Marijuana was being used socially, and as a notable part of the anti-war movement, needless to say, the people inside the Beltway wanted to know as much as possible because of the realizations that things are not going well and possibly falling apart. The Pentagon Papers had not yet been published. Lyndon Johnson's presidency fell as a result of the embroilment and the conflict and the anti-war movement. And frankly, I was aghast at being part of this machine back in D.C. that could be so blind and mean-spirited. Their take on marijuana was, how can we suppress it and prevent it, because this is something that promotes that dangerous trait of critical thinking, because it was linked with the rebellion of the anti-war people against the military machine, the military-industrial complex. And so basically I defected. I came to California and left federal government and went into private practice.
Well, excuse me for interrupting. You were told not to find any positive result in your research. Was that true?
Correct. They're interested in finding anything toxic, anything that could be used to dissuade the use of cannabis. But at the same time, they recognized, although it couldn't be admitted, that it was relatively benign. The big problem with dealing within the federal bureaucracy, or I suppose any bureaucracy, is the compartmentalization and restriction of flow of information. For example, I was not allowed to speak officially to anybody unless I get it cleared with my supervisors and they authorize who it is that's making the inquiry as to what could be said. And if one didn't go strictly through the chain of command, then it just would not happen. And this is the kind of thing that stifled an effort that I initiated to try to get harm reduction types of information about drugs publicized over the FM New York media, which was really leading public opinion in many ways, and set up a meeting with some of the Murray the K and other named DJs, but the meeting was scrubbed because it didn't have upper echelon approval.
So you were censored.
Oh yeah.
And I was hoping you could fill us in on your role with the Schaefer Commission as well.
I was simply a consultant. That my specialty, and it still is, was the history of medical cannabis, the medicinal uses of it, and documenting and chronicling how much it used to be used and what it used to be used for.
Can you talk about what happened to that report a little bit?
This was part of the Nixon administration's distraction and palliation of the scientific and medical communities as he put together the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 that classified cannabis as having no medicinal redeeming importance and being Schedule I, highly dangerous, to be avoided, which is a total lie. But this is the way it is today, that federal law still is driven by this this insanity put together by the Nixon Justice Department apparatchiks.
What was the conclusion of the Schaefer report?
Okay, that is Dr. Todd Micarea, who passed away about 12 years ago. I first met Todd Micarea at the Washington Smoke-In in 1978, just a week after my 18th birthday. He had a tri-corner hat on and spoke from the stage there at the Washington Smoke-In. He also was one of the primary proponents of the very first marijuana vote in the United States, which was Proposition 19 in California in 1972. They only got 32% of the vote. He also started the first medical marijuana clinic in California, which was the first medical marijuana state. And the drug czar attacked him personally. Barry McCaffrey, General Barry McCaffrey, was the drug czar at the time, and he took aim at him in several national press conferences, claiming that Dr. Micarea would write medical marijuana for writer's cramp, which was pretty ridiculous at the time. But Micarea was censured by the California Medical Board. He came down with cancer, and the cancer spread to his brain about 3 months before he passed. He sold his medical clinics in Berkeley, California to me, and I operated those for about a year before I sold them to a sister who continued his practice there in the Bay Area. But Dr. Micarea was one of the leading lights of marijuana legalization and one of the first proponents of medical marijuana, and worked with Dennis Perone to pass medical marijuana's Prop 215 in California in 1996. So I've got to just remind our viewers of that history a little bit. Well, if you are in need of medical marijuana today, we have a physician referral service and doctors who can help you all over the country. You can call our office anytime, night or day, at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. If you have any questions about marijuana or medical marijuana, or you want a doctor's referral for marijuana, you can call us at 503-235-4606. We'll be happy to help you. We will be back next week. We'll have Kevin Bjornson back on as a guest next week and talking about federal law enforcement's tactics in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So stay tuned for next week's show. I want to thank Twig and Lee for coming out tonight, playing some music.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, it's
Have a
great.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
And congratulations on your recent marriage, Twig. Happy
Yep.
Valentine's Day.
Thank
Happy
you.
Valentine's Day.
I found somebody brave enough.
All right.
You bet.
All right. Well, congratulations. Happy Valentine's Day to all of our viewers out there. You're going to play the old, is it a traffic song?
Yeah.
Found My Way Home. So Can't Find My Way Home. That's it. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week and help us restore hemp. Good night.
Come down on your own and leave your body alone. Somebody's got to change. You are the reason I've been waiting for so long. But I in the end and I can't find the time. Oh, but I'm wasted and I can't find my way home. And I can't find my way home. Come down on your throne and leave your body alone. Somebody's got to change. You are the reason I've been waiting for so long. Somebody holds the key. Well, I'm in and I just ain't got the time. Oh, but I'm wasted and I can't find my way home.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, viewers. Help us restore him. Good night.